Welcome to City Conversations. Today we're here to talk about how we're trying to open up the lines of communication and increase trust and transparency across the city. And so with me today, I've got Dr. Wade, our Human Relations Director, Chief of Police Gina Hawkins, and Chief of Fire and Emergency Management Mike Hill to help talk about that a little bit. And so really this is focused along a movie called The Hate You Give and some things that these folks here have done with their people and with our citizens to help build that trust within the community. And so I want to start with Police Chief Gina Hawkins and talk a little bit about what that means to her folks and where this really all came from. So Chief, tell me about this movie, The Hate You Give, and how this all came about.
So let me share. I was at a conference, a law enforcement conference, and it's the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. And at the conference, we were in part of a training where the director, George Tillman Jr., was actually showing us, before it came out, short previews of the movie, which was, the previews itself were very, emotional, provoking. And then he was sharing with us that this is going to have a lot of different sides of the story and talking about the atmosphere of law enforcement in the community and trust. And he was sharing that the resolve should bring a lot of thought-provoking ideas. He offered to anyone, any chief in the room, if you want the opportunity to have this movie in your city before the showing, let me know. And, I was one of the first ones to raise my hand. And he came true to that. He actually sponsored a full movie theater, and I sent out invites because the impact was a police department being able to show a movie that we know is not going to have great feelings, but the issue is that we need to talk about these things so we can hear all sides of the stories of feelings and transparency, and then that builds the community of when you have that opportunity to trust. So within October 2018, we had the AMC Theater in Fayetteville booked up and was showing the movie to many individuals of all demographics, many leaders, and I and many of my officers, including, was seeing it for the very first time. So we all had a lot of emotions and a lot of awareness and at that time. So that's how it came.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that was the first time you saw it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a powerful movie, and I watched it before we came here to do the show. Obviously, I had to learn about it as well, and it has a very powerful message in there of lots of different types of messages. Yeah. But so when you did that, you saw the movie and then had conversations afterwards?
We did.
And so that started this out.
Yeah, and we truly, I had to actually give the trust to the director to say, I don't even know what's going to happen or what it's going to show, but it might ignite some feelings on all sides.
Sure.
But we're prepared to talk about it, and let's talk about it.
Well, look, I hope one thing that people watch, because we're going to keep repeating that title, The Hate You Give, that's the movie we want people to go watch, because they can take away from our conversation what we're talking about and what we learned and what our folks learned, our officers learned by watching this, and our citizens as well. But we want people to really see that so they can get that full impact. So what you did back in 2018 transforms into where we are today with Dr. Wade, Anthony Wade, talking about what you're now doing from the Human Relations Department. Tell me how that then moved to what you're doing now.
Well, I was blessed that Chief Hawkins not only selected the film, but when she brought it, she invited me as one of the attendees to the film to actually go through that experience. And I was truly moved. I was born in Wilmington, North Carolina in the 50s. And so this film brought a lot of things home to me. And I saw how it reached across all multiple demographics. And so I approached the chief after the event, asked if we could collaborate on having community engagement events. She was all in, said, let's do it. And as such, the first event, the first community engagement event over at Fayetteville Technical Community College was held in March of 2019.
Right.
And then the chief and the police department were the first collaborative partners. And we had other people who attended. Chief Hill and his department attended, Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church. There were a whole host of individuals, which resulted in the second partnering, which had fire department, also had Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church, and also had the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office there too. So all of us realized what a powerful piece this was, what it meant to our community, and as such, we've had two of those meetings, and we'll have a third before the end of the year.
Okay. And so really taking it from just the police department level to now the city level and beyond, because you've spread it, as you said, you've got police, you've got fire, you've got the sheriff, you've got the churches involved, you're trying to bring in citizens, as we'll see here with a couple taped interviews we've done here shortly. But let's go then and take a look at some of the folks that actually were part of your group to talk about what they got out of this movie and what it really meant to them. Sure.
It spoke to me on two levels. It spoke to me as a law enforcement officer, and it spoke to me as an African American. It was very profound and gave me a perspective. I already knew from one perspective, for both perspectives really, and it just made you think. It was hurtful. It was a painful watch at times because. As an African American, I experienced some things and observed certain other behaviors. And so that was one of the things, very profound and very thought-provoking.
The movie spoke to me really in a powerful way. I think it was a clear picture of reality and the things that are going on in our nation today, and the issues of race, of law enforcement in different cultures, the view of law enforcement in different cultures and communities.
I'd say the film really spoke to me when I realized that Star is in the same kind of age group that I am, and most of the people at the screening were a lot older than I was. I'd say it was one of the only youth group members, I guess, and I got to relate to all of the high school party scenes and also the relationships between Star and other characters in the movie. And it was more personal towards like my age group and all that.
It seems that most of us have assumptions. And when we have the ability to see something from a different perspective, and in the movie The Hate You Give, you see several different perspectives. There was... when Sandy and I viewed the film, there were many in law enforcement. And when you know people rather than just know about people, probably one of the most striking moments that was just difficult to watch but important to watch is when the father was being mistreated in front of his family. And it's hard to imagine that anybody couldn't relate to how anyone would want to protect their family. It was, really hats off to Chief Hawkins and her vision to actually bring this film to the community, which sparks important conversations.
So remember that the folks we just watched, I want our audience to remember this, is that those folks were the participants in the last series that you did. And so we've got all these different people coming in from the outside. And one of the reasons we wanted both the chiefs here today is I think you realize you've got, 650 people, give or take, chiefs, sworn and non-sworn, and you've got 332. So roughly 900 people of the 1,600 people in our organization in the city of Fayetteville, so we are one of the largest employers in the city, are under your purview. And so when you, as leaders, are talking about this thing, whether they watch the movie or not, and all 650 or 350 watch that, it doesn't matter as much as the fact that you as leaders are involved in doing this because it permeates down. And so that's the important part. But really, Chief, what I wanted to ask you as we look to what we just saw here and what that meant to our participants, what does it mean to you as the chief for fire and emergency services and your firefighters in terms of what they encounter as they work across the city to help our citizens?
Yes, well, the fire department's always been involved in the community, but I have an interest to get the department more engaged in the community, and this exercise provided a level of engagement that surpassed any of my expectations. And that's important because of the trust that it fosters that we need in the community. We have the benefit in our profession, we're probably one of the most trusted professions there is out there. I could walk into a stranger's house on the worst day of their life, and a parent will hand me their child, their most cherished possession, to say, here, fix it, and let me leave with that child. So I know what we can accomplish with our implied trust we have, but just imagine what we can get done if they knew us by our first names.
That's powerful. And to think from that interpersonal level, what you all go through, both of your staff, your police officers, your firefighters do is incredible. And so when they're thinking on level, I think that means a lot. And so that's what I got as I was listening before we came in to do this show about what you all did that was so powerful to me. So I'd also like to go back and listen to what Wes Cookman has to say, one of our local folks here, about the trust and vulnerability aspect. And then, Dr. Wade, I want to ask you your take on that trust and vulnerability. Sure. So let's cut back to Wes and see what he's got to say on the trust and vulnerability aspect of this film.
And several of us believe that trust is a real key to being able to have good discussions, but trust has to be earned. And so there can be a politeness, which kind of keeps us as a civil society. But if we're going to discuss those, difficult, and I think in maybe our group, how we had group discussions after the movie, the brilliant way that Dr. Wade and Chief Hawkins put that together. What kind of came out? Some folks are nervous to share their thoughts at the risk of being misunderstood, or at the risk of unintentionally offending someone. What would you call it? The facilitators of our discussion, I thought, were just really good at kind of helping. What do you call it? Lowering your, lowering your guard. Kind of creating a safe place for everyone to share what they were really thinking.
So, after listening to what Wes had to say, what is your take, Dr. Wade, on the trust and vulnerability piece of this?
Sure. Well, Mr. Cookman is absolutely correct. The trust piece comes from the whole discussion about perceptions, stereotypes. If people believe something is being real, it's real to them, regardless of whether it's real or not. In these facilitated sessions, we had the opportunity to create a safe environment where residents could come together with public safety professionals and get to have a discussion where everyone was respected, everyone was valued, and they got to see beyond the uniform, beyond the badge. It was almost just short of a first name basis. And that created a relationship that also resulted in the takeaway that, I really do need to judge people based on who they are and not necessarily the perceptions or the experiences I've had.
Sure.
Let's judge each individual as exactly that, an individual, as opposed to just castigating the entire profession or the entire, in this case, city government or public safety in general.
Sure.
So I thought that Mr. Cookman's comments were appropriate. They were honest. He also talked about the value of how this particular engagement meeting allowed people to kind of get beyond that and have an opportunity to have the types of dialogues that provokes trust and builds a sense of safety in terms of their relationships with public safety.
And so, Chief, either of you chiefs, from your side, what does that trust and vulnerability mean to you?
It's very crucial. I talk about that all the time. First of all, it takes a lot for us. You mentioned we have over 300 employees together that really service the community. We are professionals, but at the same time, watch the movie and know we are also part of the community. And that transparency is difficult also, truly, honestly, for officers, because historically we have been perceived as strong, even by ourselves. So to be able to afford trust to the community, we also have to be part of the watching the movie, face the reality of, I feel a certain kind of way. There's a scene in the movie where one of the uncles is in law enforcement, and he's on both sides. He knows the struggles of the family, but he also knows the struggles of his profession. And being honest with that, really, it's a transparency, vulnerability, reality of there's certain things that we have to do as the professional, which is face ourselves and face our own biases, and face the reality that people might have a reason for feeling a certain way.
Sure. And
because of that, we're going to afford them that opportunity of understanding and patience. So it's a lot of growth on both sides, the community and in our profession. So transparency is really very vulnerable, very, very vulnerable, because you have to concede that I've got to grow.
Right. Yeah, I think about that every time I go by a police officer who's pulled somebody over, and you see that officer getting out of the car to go up to another car, and I'm always watching in the rearview mirror as I go by to think, how would I interact and react if I were either one, the driver, or to the police officer, and what you do, because there's a certain amount of fear
It is.
either from the police officer side as you approach the car or the passenger, because you don't know what's happened and what they may have seen. And so how do those perceptions play from both sides, and recognizing the stressors that may exist there from both the police officer side or the recipient in the car is getting pulled over, or Chief, from your side, as you're interacting with people who are in just dire straits. They've experienced a tragedy, and you're there to help. And how do your people interact? I don't know, from a vulnerability perspective for you, what does that mean?
I think the biggest takeaway for us is the police department has been very successful with the community policing model. And we use a similar strategy we refer to as community risk reduction. And when we're able to engage the community and react at that personal level, they reveal their vulnerabilities, which allows me to identify risks and put together mitigation strategies for those risks. But it also gives us the tools that we need to sidestep any barriers that may be to get that message communicated to the public.
Yeah, it's critical. It really is. And so, again, hats off to both of you for what your people do to help enforce this within the community, and realizing what they go through, because on a daily basis, this is what they live. So, Chief Hawkins, before we go to the next thing, I want to ask about what this thing from a takeaway. What's the biggest thing you take away from this? Because I don't want to hear from some of our participants what they took away. But before we do that, what's your takeaway from this movie? If you could take away one thing, what would that be?
So I think it's going to be truly the title of the movie. The title of the movie is The Hate You Give. And what does that mean? That's the reality of ownership for everyone, law enforcement professional, community, to say that you take ownership in how everyone else sees you, perceives you. You have power in that. So if you are giving out hate, the return is going to possibly be hate in return.
Sure.
So when you have that ownership and really learn from that continuously, you have power to change that.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I took away from watching this as well. So let's take a look at what some of our participants took away from this as well.
I took away that an awareness of how people will have to go through that, because I've known friends who have passed away or been in a situation like that where they were in fear of their life. So I took away that, you have to be aware that those things can happen and that it is something that we have to deal with. But eventually I feel that we will overcome that, and society will grow or groom itself into a better place to live one day. So.
Just encouraged and inspired me to continue to work hard, that all of us have a role to play and to do the best that we can. I know for myself, I want to constantly do a better and better job of listening and not being judgmental, and understanding that we all have different life experiences that have brought us to where we are. And more than likely, my guess is if we knew each other's life experience, we would probably cut each other a whole lot more slack and a lot of room if we knew that story. Everybody has a story. And so that film just, oh wow, it does a great job of dealing with some real life issues.
I take away, I think what I do, unfortunately, I have the ability, it's just me, as to interpersonal communication is important. You cannot judge people. You have to get to know people. And as an officer, from my lowest rank, is always relating and interacting with citizens, no matter who they are. Treat people in a respectful, dignified manner, no matter economic status or who they are, ethnicity. It does not matter.
I believe that that Fayetteville is a great town. I believe that the United States of America is the greatest nation on the planet. No doubt about it. I served my country as a soldier in the Army. Yet I recognize we still have some problems. We have some issues, and a big one of the big problems is the not understanding one another, not taking the time to get to know one another as it relates to different cultures. And so we've got some work to do. not only with the cultures, but even getting to know those who serve us in law enforcement, and to, they're people too, and they have families too, and so we've got some work to do in our country and in our city.
So, Chief Hill, tell me from your side. Chief Hawkins has explained her takeaway from this. What would be your takeaway from this movie that you could share with the audience?
My personal takeaway was it reminded me how naive I can be. There was an expected mother in one of the work sessions that I participated during the exercise, and she relayed a story of a concern her friend had with what she was planning on naming her unborn child. And she cautioned her, she said that this name will follow this child forever. And as this child's applying for jobs, there are some people that will be looking at these applications and will be able to determine the ethnicity of this child, and she may not get a fair shot. For somebody that screened hundreds, if not thousands, of applications, that never crossed my mind to do that or realize that really happens. So, having these conversations with the different demographics in the community, hey, this is real. There is unconscious bias out there. We need to be vigilant and aware of it.
No, absolutely. I think that was one of the things that Mr. Cookman said too. If we could walk in somebody else's shoes and understand where they came from before and know their story, that may give us a better understanding for realizing that we all come from different places, but you've got that common ground you need to go to so that those biases aren't there. Dr. Wade, from your side, what's your perspective or your takeaway from this? If I could say one thing was most important to you, what would that be?
I think the important piece is when people look at the film, I want them to look at it as a multitude of issues. This film goes across race, youth, family, police community relations, human relations. It's a powerful film, and even though there'll be a focus that you're immediately drawn to, if you watch it again, you'll see these other nuanced themes that are equally as important, and that's why it was brilliant. Once again, Chief Hawkins in her selection of this film. It allows us to talk. It allows youth to relate to it as well as adults. It allows just a kaleidoscope of conversations to occur, and that's wonderful.
Okay, yeah, you're right. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. There are many things. It's hard to just pin it on one thing that makes this movie special.
That's society. That's where we live,
It
right?
is, yeah.
It's a lot of things that affect everyone.
Right. Very complex
Mm-hmm.
issue. And so we'll take a look again at the training aspect, our last little vignette here from those who participated to see what their takeaways were, and then talk a little bit about that.
And there were some powerful conversations going on after the meeting. It was really amazing to hear one of the officers share that he had to talk with his son, about what happened if you're pulled over. I never would have imagined that was necessary also, but it is. And so I just think that there are so many learning experiences that are available to us if we would just take the chance.
And that's what it was all about. We know can we change all mindsets? No, but I can change 2-3 police officers' mindset. If I can change 5-6 citizens' mindset, we have just won. And I think that's what it's the win. Win perspectives and win partnership and collaboration.
It was very nice to speak to other stakeholders in the community, especially police officers and fire department officers that were all present in the discussion groups. And I got to speak as a youth person, and I got to tell them how people my age feel. Because most of the time we're left out of the conversation because youth people don't necessarily participate as much in group discussions with adults. Most feel that it's because our opinion doesn't matter, or it's because we're shadowed apart from everybody else. So it was really nice to give my take on the movie, and it was very different from a lot of the adults that I got to speak with, and so it was very nice to hear different opinions and also speak my own.
You have to start somewhere. One great thing that's happening, we don't have huge incidents right at the moment that has galvanized the community. So is it an old Chinese proverb, dig your well before you're thirsty? So there seems like a wisdom that's going on with this project is to let's make as much progress as we can as a community, as almost preventive maintenance, that we see what's happening across the country, and we're not going to wait until something were to happen. although there have been heartbreaking things that have happened in our community, but as far as making national news with this particular issue, we have been spared from that. And perhaps from the wisdom of this project, there can become greater understanding. Certainly seemed that way. We were very impressed with the whole spirit of this project, and hope that everyone will take the time to watch this movie, The Hate You Give.
So as I watched the movie, and then I think back to what Pastor Brinkley said, what got me was when he said, yeah, I didn't think about that, but when I heard about a police officer telling his kids, what do you do in a situation like that? So that's coming from a professional who does that for a living to tell their kids. And I thought, well, have I ever done that with mine? And I hadn't. And so it made me think about, what do you tell your kids to do? Because, and this won't give away the movie, but I'm sure you all remember this because it was a vivid part of the movie, and really the genesis for that conversation is what happens when you get pulled over. Where do your hands go on the wheel? What do you do? How do you react? Somebody understood that process and somebody didn't, and bad things happened in the movie. But you think through that, so what does that mean in your life for you or for your kids? And again, back to the perceptions that go on there. And so, Chief, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, very, very good point. And even as Chief Hill commented on different perception, we are, before we became law enforcement, we are individuals, and me personally, of color. And the fact that you never had to have that discussion or even thought about it, or you never thought about the idea of how your name will appear, comes on my mind. Yeah. And I have to teach and educate my children, my family members, because it's a reality. It's not a reality that we make an excuse for, but it's a reality that I live, that no way am I want any family member or any person I know to be harmed. So I'm going to train them on what to do to survive.
Right.
And then I'm going to train them also to be successful, so that people understand that is a reality for people of color. You are going to train your people, your kids, your family members on what to do to make sure you're safe. And if you see something, because of historically, not just recent, historically what we've experienced, that's a reality. And the fact that we're able to share that in a movie and have the discussion, you're like, wow, that's something that you never have to think about. That's a regular discussion.
And I would even take it a step farther beyond the race piece to think about the look different than me piece from a religion perspective. So think about a woman wearing hijab. So you see somebody wearing hijab in our society, not normal, you make assumptions because of a Muslim background to say, well, that person's not like me. What assumptions do I make? And since 9/11's transpired and all those things have happened, you know, my perception when I'm in Afghanistan or Iraq as a soldier before I retired, I see it there. That's normal. But you come back here into our setting, much different. And so again, those perceptions change.
Absolutely.
And so it could be race, it could be religion, it could be gender. So lots of different things that go on there. And then I think the other part I got from that, listening to Major Whitaker, was the training effect of this. We as an organization, 1,600 employees in the city, you as leaders within the police and within the fire realm, teaching your people how to do it. But it's that one, it's that two, it's that three people at a time. And oh, by the way, you're affecting citizens. So you see Pastor Brinkley talking to his congregation after having this conversation. And so that to me is very powerful. So you're teaching a few at a time. Will you teach the entire city of 208,000? No. But this conversation we're having here and what you all are doing is just incredibly powerful. So I thank you for all of that. And what I want to do again is encourage our viewers to go, hey, look, if you do nothing else from watching this show today, make sure you go watch the movie The Hate You Give. Puts you in a frame of mind to realize that there are things going on out there that you don't think about, whether you're a white male, a black female, a Muslim, whatever it is. It gives you a perspective to think about things from your foxhole and how it might be different for other people so that we can all get together better and do things well within the city, within our society. And so with that in mind, I want to just say thanks, Dr. Wade, Chief Hawkins, Chief Hill, for joining us today, sharing a little bit about what you do, and I'm excited to see what y'all do next as you continue to do this across the city. So thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed our show.